Hi folks, welcome back to the channel, and today we are going to be reviewing the 1994 film Natural Born Killers. This film was directed by William Oliver Stone, a man who has been a part of some pretty big genre and era-defining projects such as the film Platoon, Wall Street, Born on the 4th of July, and he also wrote the screenplay for Scarface. So this man has had quite the reputation under his belt. And Natural Born Killers is one of his most well-known projects. The film stars Woody Harrelson playing the main character, and also stars Juliette Lewis playing the secondary main character. Both respectively play Mickey and Mallory, who are two crazy serial killers who love to do nothing more than murder, kill, rape, and maim. And soon enough they get married, so they become this because the film is also, not only is it about the story of Mickey and Mallory being these two love birds who are also murder birds, but also the romanticization and the glamorous way in which the media, specifically TV news, portrays such serial killers. We see examples such as Charlie Manson, Ted Bundy, a lot of quite big name celebrity serial killers are in this film as stock footage. And a lot of the editing, speaking of, reminds me of A Clockwork Orange, which is also another film that talks about, sort of romanticizing and in a way softening violence, although I would say that Natural Born Killers is a much more violent film. Speaking of screenplays, I was a bit worried to see that this film's screenplay was written by the man, the myth, the legend, the foot-obsessed Quentin Tarantino, but I'd actually like to say that this is one of the better screenplays that he's written, in my opinion. While I don't hate the guy, I'm not exactly a big fan of his works. I mean, I do love me some Pulp Fiction, Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained. I even love a bit of Reservoir Dogs, but I don't exactly think he is this incredibly genius writer and director that a lot of people crack him up to be. I gave Death Proof a watch a few years ago because everyone was clamoring, saying that that was one of the greatest pseudo 70s, 80s, and 90s exploitation films, in the same vein as I Spit on Your Grave, and just a bunch of video nasties from that era. I gave that film a watch. I hated that film. One of the worst films I've ever seen in my life, because he really likes to insert a lot of, and it's not the feet stuff, all right? The feet stuff, I could care less about what that man is into, really. As long as he's not hurting anyone. I mean, he does cast himself into some of his films so he can act out his foot fetish, but, whatever, man. You do you, as long as you're not hurting anyone. What bothers me is the fact that he presents his long drawn-out dialogue scenes as some, incredible genius writing. Oh, my dialogue scenes are everyone loves his dialogue scenes because they're 20 minutes long of people going back and forth, the opening scene to Reservoir Dogs in the breakfast place or the coffee shop, whatever. I actually kind of like that scene because while I do appreciate long drawn-out dialogue when it's done right, when it pertains to the story, when it's something like Death Proof, where it's just three people talking about movies and music, which I do like. I mean, hell, I like watching people review movies and stuff. But when it's not in a critically established manner, when it's not written in essay format and it's just people rambling on, it gets painfully boring. It's pain. It hurts. One of the most interesting parts about this film is the editing. And I feel like this movie wouldn't be half as popular as it is if it wasn't for the spastic editing. According to the notes taken from this original director's cut DVD, there were over 3,000 edits to this film. And for the time being, the editing is avant-garde, it is experimental, it is surreal. There are a lot of moments where characters are talking and in the background they have projected like a film or stock footage of violence. There was a very jarring but pretty cool scene where Mickey and Mallory are in a hotel, and the window in the back, which is not a TV screen, it is a window, is projecting what Mickey is watching on the TV, which I kind of like that. There's also moments where characters are driving down the street, especially in the beginning of the film, after they commit the cafe murder. They are driving down the highway, and in front of them is a projector screen that is projecting films of violence, murder, some stock footage of roads from the 1930s. It looks like film from the 1930s that they've taken and projected, which is why I brought up A Clockwork Orange, because it reminds me of the scene in A Clockwork Orange where Alex is listening to music in his bedroom and he begins to envision a bunch of violent imagery, which I wonder why that was such a common trope in films back then, for movie characters to think and envision violence in their heads and also have it projected onto the movie. But I like it. However, the way the movie is filmed can also fault it, and the way it's edited as well. There are moments where the screen will turn black and white and then come back to color. There are moments where they switch from the actual professional film camera to a handheld camcorder because they're filming on live TV, so they also want to cut to what the footage would look like on live TV, which can be jarring sometimes. There are moments also where they added in these really cool animated segments that were animated by the animator Mike Smith, which almost look like Ralph Bakshi animation turned up to 11. I would almost have loved for the movie to be animated like that instead of being live action. And it's these really buff and almost superhuman interpretations of Mickey and Mallory, and I can't help but imagine that that's what they think, that's what they envision themselves to look like in their heads when they're killing and murdering, is these super cool, ultra strong, buff cartoon versions of themselves. But there's also points in the film where they reuse the same animated footage, and I can't help but feel they didn't want to spend more money on the animation. So there's moments where whilst they're killing, they show the animation, and it's cool because in this scene, Mickey has hair and his animated counterpart also has hair, but later on during the prison riot scene, they reuse the animated footage which has hair, but in this scene, Mickey has no hair. So you're like, huh? And there's also moments where two characters could be having a completely normal conversation and they just jab in the animation in there once again, which really does not add anything to the story. It's just there to make the movie look cool and crazy and avant-garde, but it feels very forced. It feels like the editing with the black and white filters, the different cameras, felt really forced, and I can't help but wonder if that was Quentin Tarantino's doing, because I know he loves to do this sort of spastic editing in his films and using different filters in his films to kind of give the illusion of a vintage movie, but you can't because it's a movie from 2012. You can't really make it feel vintage without going a further step to graining the footage, putting it onto a actual 35 millimeter print, but that's besides the point. I also love the comedy in this film. During the beginning of the film, we get a brief glimpse of what Mallory and Mickey's childhood used to look like, and it's presented in a kind of funny yet quite disturbing and eerie 80s and 90s sitcom, which is called I Love Mallory, and it basically shows the life of Mallory as a classic sitcom with the music and the laugh track. And there's a very disturbing moment in which Mallory's father begins to sexually abuse her, and the camera gets really close to their faces and it turns black and white, and the classical cheery music that was playing in the background gets slowed to this sort of eerie, ambient, and echoey demonic chanting, which I thought was a nice moment to sort of catch you off guard before it all goes back to the happy 80s Seinfeld type of, or should I say Alf type of sitcom-y goodness, or, you know, Full House. Speaking of ambiance and music, the film had a very great soundtrack. Like a lot of Quentin Tarantino films, it used a lot of licensed music as well as originally composed music. You got stuff here from Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, and the actual original soundtrack of the film was composed by none other than Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, and you can definitely tell, and he was an amazing choice for this film's soundtrack. His grimy, sort of industrial, metallic, ambient music really fits well with the disgusting and sort of, homemade feel of this film, because there are a lot of points where the film tries to feel like a low-budget film due to the quality of the camera and the special effects and the acting and all that. It really does feel like an exploitative film from the 70s, and I really think that Trent Reznor's soundtrack builds on that feeling a big part. Although I do feel that the film can be quite bloated at times. Like I said, there was the whole ending monologue from Robert Downey Jr.'s character before he gets killed. There is the elongated, almost, I think, 10-minute prison riot scene, followed by the prison escape scene, which it was mostly just an excuse to insert more scenes of nonsensical violence, which I don't have a problem with, but it drags on for a while. And the way it's also shot with the grimy camcorder, with it moving around a lot and making it all blurry, at one point, you know, my eyes just glaze over what I'm watching, and you sort of lose me there for a second, because with all these special, like, effects added onto it, like the black and white, sometimes the film goes, it uses the inverted color scheme where everything mostly goes white. It uses a red filter, it uses a green filter, it uses a blue filter. They really pulled out almost all the stock footage and special effects that they had lying in the back, to the point where it really does feel tacky. This film feels very tacky and bloated and try-hard. The film also gets very hypocritical in its message of not glorifying serial killers, where the film does attempt to paint Mickey and Mallory as awful people, because that's what they are. But towards the end of the film, they really do depict Mickey and Mallory's escape as almost this triumphant moment where, oh, it's these two lovers finally rejoicing after a year of being in prison, and they get to walk free and live together forever. It muddles your message a little bit when you say one thing one moment and then display exactly what you want to satirize the next. So it sort of becomes redundant and just becomes a satire of itself. Because when this film came out, a lot of people did glorify the killers in the film. As a matter of fact, the shooter from the Orange High School in North Carolina actually cited Natural Born Killers as one of his favorite films. If I remember correctly, probably his favorite. But this film made a crap ton of money when it came out, $110 million at the box office, which is nothing to scoff at considering that its budget was almost 2 times less than that. This DVD actually has the gall to proclaim it as the best movie of the 90s, which it isn't by a long shot. In fact, it might be one of the most overrated films of the 90s. While I do feel like the film had a lot good going for it, it basically shot itself in the foot by trampling over its own message and its editing being just way too tacky nowadays and not having aged well. And I'm giving Natural Born Killers a 5 out of 10. That's it.